goodness of God when they asked them, when they saw the memorial. We need those memorials in our lives because we know things don't always go great, right? But we need to have those highlights, those things where God has come through in our lives so that we can turn back and point to that and say, no matter what I feel right now, no matter what it seems like right now, I'm looking to what God has done in my life. And I take that and I look forward to what God is going to do in my life. And my life has been, by I guess most standards, pretty good. I think for me, my testimony is one of God's protection and provision in my life. And I think it was preparing me for when I came, to Charis, because as an international student in the US, because I was born in South Africa, and I was living in London, England for 14 years before I went to the US. So I'm an international student. I'm not allowed to work in the US, but obviously I need to live and pay my tuition and buy food and all that stuff. So that really takes some trusting in God, because every year my wife and I have to show the United States government that we've got $27,000 US available to us at the beginning, all together, before they'll let us study the next year. And as you know, having tons of money together in one place at one time is quite tough if you're not working. So hopefully what I'm going to share with you is going to be encouraging, because I'm sure many of you work and study as well. And so finances are a real thing, and God knows that you need to live and pay your rent and buy your food. So I'll just give you a quick summary of my working life, because I really feel that every step of that life was actually a preparation for me on how to trust God. I went to finish high school, and I went to university and I studied, and I messed around a bit and I took different courses, and by the time I got to my final year, I was passing sort of, but I was not so good. And then IBM, anyone the big computer company IBM, I was doing a computer science course, and they came on campus to hire people to be graduate hires and come and join their company. I thought, well, my grades are not so good and whatever, but I'll go along. It's good to have some interview experience. Maybe one day when I'm looking for a job, I'll be better in the interview. So I went to the interview, and surprise, surprise, they called me for a second interview. Okay, and I went, so the first interview was on the campus of the university. The second interview, they called me to the local office of the company, and I sat through a second interview, and what do you know, they offered me a job, right? So great, so I actually managed to finish my degree and actually qualified, which was, some people were saying, wow, you actually got through. And I went off to go work for them in Johannesburg in South Africa, which is the big financial capital of South Africa. And I've been working for them for a couple of years, and they were very good with providing training. So if you wanted to go on a training course, they would pay for it, and that was amazing. And then I was getting a bit bored, and I said to a friend, let's go to England. I want to go see the world. Let's move to England. So we got our paperwork together, got visas, and off we went to England. Now, I didn't know how to look for a job in England. Every country is different, it's a different working culture. So I'd been around, I had my what do you call it in America, resume. In South Africa, in Britain, we call it a CV. So anyway, I went on to lots of different places, and nothing was happening. And then I was praying a bit, and I went from place to place, maybe for a couple of weeks. And then one day I'm sitting in an employment agency, and the guy stands up and shouts out, does anyone know about these particular computer products? And those are the ones I'd studied just before I left South Africa. So I said, me? And there were a few other guys that stood up and said, well, this company is looking for people urgently, but you've got to write a test first. Okay, and they will pick those that do well in the test to invite them for an interview. Well, as I've said, I had just been studying that topic, so it was all fresh in my mind. So I sat down for the test and I aced the test. That was great. And they invited me for an interview. Turns out the guy that they hired for the job had disappeared. He just didn't come to work one day and no one knew where he was. And they were desperate, so there was a space for me. They hired me, they were desperate. They would have taken anyone who could walk, I think. So they hired me, and it turned out it was a bank in the City of London. Now, the City of London is a big financial district area, which is one of the big financial districts in the world, bigger than America's Wall Street. And to get to work in that industry is very hard. It's almost impossible to get in if you've never worked in a bank before. It's like, have you worked in a bank? No. Well, then you can't work here. So how do I get to work in a bank? No one will take you if you haven't worked in a bank. It's like there's something that's wrong here. But anyway, I was hired right into this bank because they were desperate. And I believe God was opening these doors the whole time, So I got into that, and they took me in and I was working, and then that was a short-term contract, and they got renewed and renewed and renewed, and then they offered me a full-time job. And that was just before. Does everyone remember the dot-com bubble, where when that burst, the whole economy crashed? Just before that happened, they gave me a full-time job. So I was, kept safe during that time because all the contracts were let go of, and I was kept. And then, within that, I was doing a particular job, and then I was interested in doing a different job. But that was also very hard to get into that because you had to have experience. But what happened? They had a hiring freeze across the company at that time, and they said that no one can hire from the outside. And then someone left from the department that I wanted to go to, but they couldn't hire someone from the outside. So they said to me, well, I know you haven't worked here before, but if you're willing to learn, we'll give you a chance. So bang, I walked, into that job. And I did that job for a few years, and then I thought, there's another department, it's part of this department, but it does slightly different work, and that's very interesting. I'd like to do that. I tell you, within like a year, I was in that department. Just the space opened up, and eventually I was basically the head technician in that department. And that was amazing, And then, by then I was starting to get tired of, I was thinking to myself, I want something else. I'm tired of working, I feel like I'm not going anywhere. I feel like my walk with the Lord is not going forward. So I thought, actually I want to leave here, but how do I do that? And then what happened? The company decided to downsize. Okay. So it's like they needed to get rid of some people, and my boss had to choose two people out of our department to get rid of people. He didn't choose me because he needed me, but he was a good friend of mine, and he remembered that I was looking to get out of it when we talked privately. So he said, I've chosen two other guys to get rid of, but if you want, I can put your name forward, and they're going to pay you out if you leave. So now my company didn't do like voluntary payouts. They chose who they paid out. So it was a miracle that he put me forward and they accepted me. And so when I left, I was given a year's salary extra on top of all the money I'd ever earned there as I left, and that's what gave us the money to come to Bible college to do our first year. And it was amazing. So, and while we were deciding, sorry, how much time have I used? Am I good?
You're good.
So we learned that this was going to happen, and by then we got to the point where we decided we were actually going to go to Bible college. And because we both, even before we met, we both wanted to do something like that separately. And then when we were talking together, we said, wow, it's a dream for both of us. So now we're trying to decide which Bible college do we go to, because the world is full of Bible colleges. And I've been listening to Andrew, a friend of mine a couple of years before that, had said, you've got to listen to this guy. So I started listening, and it's just made so much sense anyway. So we're thinking about it. We thought, well, it'd be nice to go to the US, somewhere different, away from our environment, because I think sometimes it can be useful to be away from your immediate environment, because that gives you a change, and it just gives you something to, just to change your pace. So we were looking in the US, and we said, okay, we know about Charis because I've been listening to Andrew. Sarah didn't really know much about it. And then we'd heard about Bethel. I don't know if you ever heard of Bethel Church. So those were the two we were thinking about in the US. And then one morning, so I was like, Lord, we need some guidance here. So as I was walking out, so this was before I finished working, but it was getting close to the end. I was walking out one morning to go to work, and the Lord just said to me, Sarah had been unsure about Andrew Womack. She listened to him once or twice, and his voice, and she said, he's got that funny Texan accent and a high pitch, which if you're not used to it, can be a bit, you first work yourself into it. So I was thinking, well, I'm leaning towards Andrew, but obviously we need to be in agreement, and we need to go with someone where both of us are going to grow and enjoy it. If one is just being there because of the other one, it's going to be a problem later on. So as I was walking out the door, I closed the door, and the Lord said to me, I want you to go to Charis Bible College, and don't worry, within 4 weeks Sarah will agree. And I was like, okay, Lord. And I didn't tell her because I don't want to, obviously you can manipulate people, or you can guide people to your way of thinking about what you say to them, because obviously Sarah cares about my opinion. So I said, okay, Lord, I'm not going to say anything to her. So anyway, so a few weeks later, we're driving back from church, and Sarah turns to me and says, I think we should go to Charis Bible College. I'm like, okay. So that was just a confirmation for both of us that the Lord had told me and her separately. And that's just an end. So one more financial thing. So anyway, so we had money for our first year, but we weren't sure where we were going to get the money for our second year. We're currently in our second year. And so when we left at the end of first year to go back to London and South Africa and to visit with people, we both felt strongly in our hearts that we were going to go back to college, but we didn't really know how. We were like saying, Lord, it's in your hands, we're praying, we're trusting in the finances. I'm looking back in my life and seeing where God had delivered me, where God had opened doors, and we were just focusing on those high points and just saying, Lord, you know the way. When people would ask us, are you coming back for second year? Yes, that's it, we're coming back for second year. We didn't tell everyone about our issues. We shared with some very close friends who were going to agree with us, because you need to be careful, who you share things with, because if you're sharing with people who don't believe, that's not going to be helpful to you. So, we go back to South Africa, we don't tell our families. I think we might have shared them with my parents because they're believers, they're strong believers. And then we were Skyping with these friends, and they were encouraging us. And then, so we had bought an apartment. I bought an apartment years ago in London. So I have some property there, which the Lord told me I must sell it for, and He gave me a price. So I put it on the market, but of course that doesn't automatically translate into money straight away. And I had to show the US government that we had $27,000 before the bids come back. So we were thinking, Lord, it's in your hands, Lord, it's in your hands. And we weren't letting it bother us, but obviously it's on your mind, right? And so I would have to fight, especially in the early hours of the morning. You wake up, and then the devil's whispering in your ear, oh, you don't have the money, oh, you don't have the money. Where's the money going to come from? Ha, ha, ha. So and I would have to fight, and I'd be thinking, no, devil, I'd call on the name of the Lord, I'd go back to sleep. Anyway, so long story short, so we're talking to these friends, and they say, we believe the Lord has told us to lend you £20,000, okay, British pounds, and you can pay us back when you've got the money. So that translates to roughly $30,000 US dollars. So that's basically how the Lord provided. And so He'd given me a price for my apartment, my flat in London, which for me I was like, wow, Lord, that's a lot of money to ask. Well, a few weeks back we received an offer for that exact amount, and we're busy going through the sale right now. So God is good.
God is good.